Welcome to the 12th part of my reading and commentary on my own translation of Heimskringla, and this is the 12th part of Ynglinga Saga. We're starting to inch in on historical times, or what is most often called historical times, away from legendary times. Although, as if you followed this series, you might guess I believe that quite a lot in the Ynglinga Saga, if you connect it with archaeological findings and other sources, there's no problem in calling a lot of that historical as well. We're in a really beautiful area in Aarhus Bay, in the inner part of Aarhus Bay, and right behind me, far back there, is the ruins of Erik Menved's castle. I believe built in 1282, 83, around there. And that's when most people say it was established. But it's on such a beautiful, strategically important outcropping. I would guess it was in use before that as well. A very beautiful area here. So in this part we'll be reading and I'll be commenting on the chapters of about King Adil's marriage, King Adil's death, Rolf Krake's fall, and on Øystein and Sølve Youth King. So, let's get going. So right before this, in the last episode, Vødt and Faste, King Frode the Bold's jarls in Denmark, they defeated Ottar Vendelkro, the Swedish king, in battle in Limfjorden, and dragged his body onto the shore, laid it on a mound, and let the animals and crows rip it apart and eat it up. And they sent a wooden effigy of a crow back to Sweden as an insult. So that was the last thing that happened. King Adil's marriage. King Ottar's son was called Adil, whom took the kingdom after him. He was king for a long time and became very rich. He was also in Viking a few summers. King Adil came with his army to Saxland. There a man called Geirtjof ruled as king, and his wife was called Olof the Mighty. Their children aren't named. The king was not in his lands. King Adil and his men ran up to the king's estate and plundered it, and some led the livestock down for beach cleaving. This is a weird word, and it's another one of my quite literal translations, since, as I've mentioned before, this is absolutely not meant for publishing, and that means I can do maybe some clumsy translations, but that come closer to the kind of color of the Norse and Scandinavian words. Beach cleaving, strandhogg, still used in Norwegian at least, and it literally means strand is beach and hogg is to cleave with an axe, for example, or hogge. You when you make a hogg, you can't do it with a club. It has to be with something sharp. So an axe, you don't hog with a club. So cleaving, I've translated it. And what this is Strandhogg is when they raided, they would take the livestock, or it was the act of kind of coming onto the beach and going via the beach to and either stealing someone's livestock or butchering it on the beach. So that was strandhogg. And some led the livestock down to for beach cleaving. The livestock was herded by slaves, men and women, and they brought everything with them. Among these was a wondrously beautiful maiden. Her name was Yrsa. King Adil then went home with his plunder. Yrsa was not placed among the service maids. It was soon understood that she was wise and well-spoken, and in all ways clever. The men grew very fond of her, and the king mostly so. And it came to be that Adil held a wedding for her. Yrsa then became queen in Svitjod, and they thought she was the most wonderful. Actually, with Adil, I read the other day, there's a theory in Norway. A historian has proposed that Adil is the generations of kings around this time are Norwegians who, saga writers, appropriated Attila into their sagas. So, theory, I haven't studied in detail. I was thinking of buying the book, but I think it's a quite new approach. Was that the Huns actually came up and or also held dominion over the Scandinavian countries. And I have to read the book. Maybe I'll be very surprised when I read it, but it sounds a little weird to me as I can find this in the sagas, supported by the written sources. And the written sources do mention Attila, but he's called Atle. So, but maybe the book will surprise. I do suspect, though, that like so many times you can see with historians that the temptation seems to be very strong to downplay the kind of what the old sources have written, and stretch maybe too far sometimes, off balance, into almost like conspiracy theories on history. It's like this cliche about what about the sudden Viking expansion in 793. How could suddenly the Norse come out of their primitive settlements and be for a period likely the best, most capable and war units for quite a while. I mean, they were the special guard of the Byzantine Empire. And again, it's this for me springs out of not of completely downplaying all the fornsögur and saying that all the fornsagane are just legendary, nothing to be worried about here. But if you read the Fornsagar, which are the old sagas, the pre-Viking Age sagas, they don't have the amount of detail of the Viking Age sagas, but the Viking Age sagas have much less detail than the Middle Age sagas. So if you take King Sverre's saga, it's like infinitely more detailed, and when it comes to battle tactics and geography, locations, than, for example, Olav Tryggvason's saga. And then, of course, going further back to the Fornsagar, it's even less amount of detail. But if you cross-reference the Fornsagar with what Roman authors wrote, what Norman chroniclers wrote, what Gothic chroniclers wrote, what chroniclers in Rus areas in the east wrote, then you can actually form quite a complete, at least like a draft of what's a likely scenario for a Norse prehistory. And in Jordanes Getica, even if he's filled with inconsistencies, but his inconsistencies are usually when you can see he's like really copying older sources. When he's writing information that we can't extract from foreign sources, it seems, at least to my eye, that he when they're cross-referenced with Fornsaga and so on, that it makes a lot of sense. And he was chronicling what the Goths themselves said of themselves. He was a Goth himself. And they said specifically that they originated out of Scandinavia. And they spread southwards on the rivers and also over land. And they made alliances with tribes, other Germanic tribes further south, and also with Scythian tribes, so their armies would grow. And we know that the pre-Vikings, they with Hengist and Horsa, they took most of the British, what is called England today. They conquered everything there and migrated over with their families, or a whole lot of it. Like Sutton Hoo, Anglo-Saxon. The die cast used for parts of the helm is the exact same. They've measured is the exact same used as Vendel era helmets they found in Sweden. So forged by the same smith, probably. So, and then when you go a little bit further back from this, you come to the Goth period. And here we're talking like just 100 years further back. The Goths are still active, or maybe also even contemporary with the Anglo-Saxon actions. And the earliest, like really big Goth attack in 249 or 50 by Kniva, which has parallels in the sagas with Neve. And the Niflungs, Neve was the son of Halfdan the Old, which in the Norse sagas is said to be like the great-grandfather of all the important Gothic lineages, or Norse lineages, and the Gothic lineages. So Neve, there's some parallel there. I know it's not super certain, but you have Kniva, a great warlord who comes down via the areas by the Black Sea and attacks the Roman Empire with a massive tens of thousands of soldiers. And they were not only Goths, they were also Scythians that had joined this army for plunder or whatever. And they defeated the main Roman army at the time and even killed a ruling emperor, which had never happened before. So going from Viking Age to pre-Viking Age with the Anglo-Saxon expansion from North Germany and Denmark, and then the Gothic expansion from Scandinavia into attacking Rome, but of course as time went on, what is Gothic becomes kind of a little washed out because of the alliances and so forth. But the original pulse, you can say, the Goths themselves anyway, the original pulse came out of Scandinavia. And then if you go further back, and again, not so much further back, a couple of hundred years, you have the Cimbrian attack on Rome, which was perhaps even larger and at the time terrified the Roman Empire. They came out of the Teutonic and the Cimbric tribes. And another word for Jutland is the Cimbrian Peninsula. This was the Roman name. And Thy is a region in northern Denmark, which is connected with the Teuton tribe, the Teutonus, which they talk about there. And you have loads of bronze findings in these areas that are of silverware and bronzeware and that are not made in Denmark. So the plunder, often historians say trade, but the amounts are so, and the value of them are so massive that I think plunder makes just as much sense. Anyway, you have the Cimbrian attack, where they also completely destroy massive Roman army. And one source, if I remember correctly, says that the army, they migrated, so they came with families and whole tribes, but it wasn't a peaceful migration. It was a war. It was an army coming south. And one source, Roman source, if I remember correctly, says they were 250,000 before they split up. They split into two armies when they got closer to Italy, and they attacked Italy itself. But in the end, it was not only the Danish tribes; it was also Germanic tribes and Celtic tribes that formed this massive alliance. So it's not to say that it's anything special or such, but it's just to say that this, when you look away from the legendary sources, then of course the Viking expansion looks like a sudden explosion that came out of nowhere. But if you kind of try to understand the legendary sources, you can see it's not so difficult to see that for some reason or another you would have great migrations out of the north. Now it was warmer in these times, much warmer than now. So agriculture was completely different in Norway and Denmark. You could, it's known that you could grow wheat in Bjarkøy, which is super far north, and wheat doesn't grow north of Trondheim today, barely grows in Trondheim. Maybe the population growth was quicker in the north at the time, and you would reach a state of overpopulation at intervals. Who knows? That was a bit of a digression, talking about King Adil there. So let's continue. King Adil's death. King Helge Halfdanarson ruled Leire at that time. He came to Svikjord with an army so vast that King Adil saw no other recourse than to flee. King Helge went on to land with his army and wreaked havoc, and gathered much plunder. He took Queen Yrsa and brought her with him to Leire. Leire is on Zealand in Denmark, was the main king seat there, and married her. Their son was Rolf Krake. When Rolf was 3 winters old, King Olaf came to Denmark. She then told Yrsa that King Helge, her husband, was her father, and Olaf, her mother. Yrsa then returned to Svikjord, back to King Adil, and was queen there for the rest of her life. King Helge fell while on war foot. Rolf Krake was then 8 winters old and was taken king at Leire. King Adil was in great strife with a king called Ole the Uplander. He's Uplander because he's Norwegian king from Uppland. King Adil and King Ole held a battle on the ice of Lake Vänern. There fell King Ole and Adil held the victory. Of this battle, much is said in Ynglinga Saga, and also about when Rolf Krake came to Uppsala and Adil, and when Rolf Krake sowed gold on Fyrisvollene. Rolf Krake, that's a whole chapter in by itself. He's only mentioned like in passing here, so I think I'll do a separate thing on him. King Adil was very fond of good horses, had owned the best horse at that time. His horse was called Slöngve, and another one Ravn. That one he took. That one Ravn he took off Ole when he died. Besides them, he bred another horse called Ravn. That one he sent to Hålogaland's king Godgest. King Godgest rode him, but couldn't stop him before he was thrown to the ground and died. This was at Ømd in Hålogaland. Ømd in Hålogaland. Hålogaland is this part of northern Norway. And Ømd, I haven't seen anybody really place it. There's a place by an area by something called Ømmervannet in Hålogaland, close by a place called Myrmoen, which could fit the bill because it has some archaeological findings, including a large Iron Age longhouse. And we are in the Iron Age now. But I don't know. That could be by Ømmervannet in Hålogaland. King Adil was at Disablot, ritual sacrifices, and rode the horse around the Disarhall. The horse tripped under him and fell down, and the king fell forwards off, and his head struck a rock, so his head cracked open, and his brain gushed out onto the rock. That was his bane. He died at Uppsala and is mounded there. The Sviar called him a mighty king. So they both fell, according to the saga, they both died falling off a horse. Oh. That I also heard, that Adil's life the deceitful sources would take, and the ambitious off the horsebow Frey's kin should fall. And with sand the sea of brain from son of rulers was mixed, and courageous would die Ole's foe at Uppsala. So, again, the big words for an accident. Yeah, I think I'll end there today. We've been going quite a long time, and I'll do from Rolf Krake's fall next time. If you enjoy this content, I hope you subscribe, and I enjoy revisiting the sagas, and see you next time.